Okay, we'll call to order this meeting of the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. It is Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. We'll begin the meeting by a roll call of the members. Chair Block is present. Vice Chair Reeves?
Present.
Member Lightstone?
Present.
Member Eng?
Present.
Member Allen?
Here.
Please show that all members are present. Now move to approval of the minutes of our August 21st meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion. Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of August 21st. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain, nay. Okay, please show the minutes being adopted unanimously. Now moving on to the chair's report. Just a few items. First of all, I'd like to remind anyone who may be watching via our live stream that our meetings tend to be relatively short. Today's actually going to have more content than usual. We're going to be working on our budget today, or approving our budget today. But most of the work the board members do is done between sessions. In fact, in the last 3 weeks since our last board meeting, it's been a short span since the last meeting, but in the 3 weeks we've resolved 592 cases that either employers or employees, workers, have filed on appeals. So good work, board. Another issue that's going to come up, which affects some of the kind of cases we hear, will be AB5. AB5 is billed by Lorena Gonzalez. You're all aware of it. It has to do with the issue of independent contractor or employee. As you know, at this point, the Borrello decision governs much of what we do, but that may be changed. And if I can ask Mark Wusam, our general counsel, to just briefly talk about what the impact might be of this legislation and when it might be effective.
Sure, thank you, Chair Block. Well, AB5, there's no emergency clause in it, so it will be effective in the regular course of legislation, so that'd be January 1st. As you know, AB5 does create this bright line test adopting what's referred to as the ABC test for the determination of whether or not a worker is an employee or an independent contractor for various provisions of law. And the most recent version of AB5 would apply this test to the unemployment insurance code. So as of January 1st, that's something we would look to, and certainly, presuming it is passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, we would provide materials to the board in anticipation describing its legal impact.
So even though we'll be reading about AB5 once the governor signs it, assuming he signs it, and some of the parties before us might not realize it's not applicable yet, our appellate judges and our board know that until December 31st, we stick with current law. And theoretically, a decision we make on December 31st might be different if it were made on January 2nd because there's different standards that would apply. So, okay. Yeah, sure.
So, Mark, if we have a case that was appealed to us on January 2nd, but was heard in December, what standard will we apply? It would be different from what the field office applied?
Well, I don't know that we should answer that question in the abstract at this point, but to the extent we have law governing the determinations at the time the case was eligible for benefits, we have to make that determination.
Time of the benefit. Okay, thank you.
One thought, which is that, and there may, in the end, each case is always a case-by-case basis based on the facts, these determinations. It might wind up being in a number of cases that we have had or will have, that we end up in the same place under the old rule or under the new bill.
We're just being aware of the difference and making sure that our judges and parties are aware of the change. Thank you. Good question, though. Yeah, interesting. One last issue for Chair's report. Today from 5 to 7, there will be a celebration of Michael Allen's confirmation and my confirmation as members of this board by the California Senate. And it's going to be at 15L, Cafeteria 15L. Hopefully many of you can join us. With that, the chair's report is complete. Moving on to board members' reports. Vice Chair Reeves.
Just very briefly, at the last board meeting, I asked a number of questions about our budget in times of a recession. I want to thank Robert and others and Linda who came and gave me a briefing on how that budget really works. And he reminded me of something that I think is worth repeating, which is almost the entire budget is we're fairly funded. In other words, Congress and the administration in DC controls our budget, not necessarily the governor and our Department of Finance, which is helpful to keep in mind that we don't have a lot of flexibility and a lot of say into what that budget looks like. We're sort of at the mercy of what the federal government gives us. And I look forward to Robert's report on the budget for this coming year, especially with all the economic headwinds that we seem to be facing.
Thank you, Dan. Moving on to Member Eng.
I have nothing to report. I will also ask some questions about the budget.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Moving to Member Lightstone. And Member Rao.
Yes, I noticed in my last report, I said that our newsletter would be out almost any day. Well, my report would be the same today, that almost any day it should be going out. My understanding is some last-minute corrections have been made, some edits, and so I would just ask that this newsletter maybe be the fall newsletter, because I think that would be the best. And other than that, as I do in every report that I make, just a big thank you to our management staff, our IT staff, our AO judges, our field judges, the support staff. I think that from my viewpoint, over the last few years, things have steadily been going in the right direction. And I just want to thank everybody for their very good work.
Thank you, Michael. If there are no other comments from the board, we move on to item number 5 on the agenda, public comment. Do any members of the public wish to address the board? Any members of the public wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, which is a report by Elena Gonzalez, our Chief ALJ and Executive Director.
Block, Vice Chair Reeves, and board members. I will start with the field operations timeliness standards report for the standard of 60% or more of the cases should be heard within 30 days, closed within 30 days. For this month, the standard was not met. It is 53.7% were closed within that time. But year-to-date, it's 67.4%, so we're still on track to make time lapse for the year. For the month end, 80% need to be closed within 45 days, and it is at 80.7%. And for the year, it's 90%. So we are taking some steps to address in the field those issues of, we would like to make the standard each month if we can, so we have no concerns at the end of the year. Although the average is still good, we are going to take some steps such as mass calendars and other calendaring manners to address those issues. There has been, we have had a fairly steady caseload, and it will go up and down from time to time, although there has not been a substantial increase with any regularity. It will balance out. So although we've gone up in the last month a certain percentage, it's not clear whether it will stay at a higher level or it will balance out again, because we've looked at the numbers over the last couple of years. And certain times of year, for example, when school cases will come in from the school teacher cases in the fall, we'll get more cases. So we're aware of the trends, and right now we feel comfortable with the actions that we're taking towards the numbers. The case age of the pending cases is 27.9%. The standard is under 30 days for a pending case. So you can see the balance of open cases on the report at the end of this month is 21,000. The other thing I wanted to report is it will be a meeting next Monday that has been arranged by the the Government Operations Agency, a forum that is called California Leads as an Employer. It's a forum that is directed towards upper-level staff with the various agencies. The directors and secretaries have been invited. The afternoon session is going to address diverse gender, racial pay equality, non-discrimination, and non-harassment principles in the workplace. So that's going to take place at the Franchise Tax Board, and it was a mandatory and non-transferable invitation. So I will be attending on behalf of the board, as well as the morning session, chief counsels, personnel officers, and others have been invited. So Lori Kurosaka, Mark Sam, and Rob Silva will be attending on behalf of the board the morning session. So that will be interesting, and we'll report back to you what we learned from that forum. The last thing, as I mentioned this before, but we finally finalized the last two of the Yellow Belt training sessions that all the managers at CUIAB will be attending that are sponsored by CalHR. We have arranged for sessions that only will be CIOB employees. I did attend last week the White Belt training, which is a prerequisite to the Yellow Belt training, and I successfully ordered office supplies in a more efficient and quick manner in my training issue. So it was actually quite interesting to work as a team to try to find, a process that might take, 30 days and try to make it take 15 days. It's actually very valuable training, and I think that having all the management take it by December will be an advantage to the board for trying to make things happen in a more efficient and quick manner. I have no security incidents to report for the month, which is a good thing, and that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Elena. Any questions or comments? Dan?
Thank you, Elena. A question. So when it says on your workload under all, is this the average 17,889 cases per, is that an average per month that we normally get? You say all? That's the average monthly workload?
It's looking here, and so that's just all.
Oh, I see. I didn't understand the question. Yes, it's all of the cases, including the UI cases, but it includes the DI, paid family leave, any other case, and tax cases, of course.
Okay, so of those cases, 16,189 were UI cases.
Correct.
And we closed 15,735 cases. Is it common in the summer months that because of vacations that we'd have a drop off in the number and percentage of cases that are closed within 30 days? Like, is this a routine thing you'd see every June, July, or?
Time periods, both the summer months and the November, December months. The numbers after those 2 months are generally a little lower because a lot of vacation time is taken by ALJs during those.
And finally, what is there a number here I could see the average, like the overall workload month to month? Understanding like how this compares, does the workload go up? Did it go down?
Oh, we if you'd like a report, I mean, we prepared them.
I mean, I just wonder if it's on this page, I'm just not seeing it.
It's not on this page.
Okay.
But
I'm just curious as to what our workload from month to month has looked like over the past, now we're in, it's in that chart? Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
I'm glad Jody found it, because after a while, sometimes these are in your packet. but you
I
don't
thought
look at
I've
them
seen it before,
anymore.
so I just wanted to refer back to it.
Glad you
Thank
found
you.
it.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions or comments for
Well,
Elena?
yes.
Member Ellen?
So Elena, I was just curious, I was looking at the cycle time, the summary report, and I was looking at the disability cases, and the statewide average is 70. And I was just wondering, Fresno is at 91 and Inglewood's at 80. I was just wondering, are there particular reasons why their average is skewed much higher than the others?
Are you talking just about DI or
Yeah,
in general?
DI cases, not paid family leave, but just DI cases. Overall average days to process an appeal?
Offices you're talking about, Fresno and,
Yeah, I'm not picking on anybody, I'm just curious because I'm looking at the statewide average and then it kind of pops out 91 and 80. And I'm just wondering, are there any operational concerns or things that we should be aware of?
not that I'm aware of. There are so few of these cases that one case that gets a delay can skew the average days to process if one of them sits for a while or needs more information or what have you, because there are,
So you're saying because of the volume of cases, just one case could be an aberration, which could throw the numbers way off?
or a few cases, but, oh, this is not paid family leave, I'm sorry. You're not talking about paid family leave, you're talking about DI?
PI.
I was thinking of paid family leave. No, and you know what, I'll look into it. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I looked at the report and I did not note, that is,
Yeah, it's kind
Doesn't-
of sticks out, so I was just curious.
I agree with you, and I am now curious, and I will check into why that happened. I'll see if there's a way to address that.
Thank you, Michael. So if you could just report back to Michael when you get some information in, if there is an issue, report to the board at your next. Any other questions or comments for CEO Gonzalez? Seeing none, we'll move on to report by our presiding administrative law judge for appellate operations, Jody Remke.
Good afternoon. I'll be reporting on AO from the document in your packet back to the August 2019 performance indicators titled at the top. And on the right side of the page, it's the appellate operations information. As for time lapse and cases needing to be concluded in 45 days or less, the guideline, as you know, is 50% or more of the cases, and the board closed 96.7% of the cases in that time frame. So again, we're doing very well. Year to date, we're at 95.8%. For the requirement of closing cases in 75 days or less, as you know, again, the requirement is 80% or more, and we did 99.7% of the cases. So again, we're doing really well at this point in the year. Case aging is dropping because of the caseload dropping as well. And the average days of a pending case is right now is 15.2, with the standard being 40 days or less. As I did mention, a lot of these strong numbers are in part an indicator of the slight decline in appeals reaching the board at this point.
Thank you, Jody. Any questions or comments?
I did have one additional comment, if that was okay. I just wanted to acknowledge AOALJ Bill Purcell, who I know you all work with closely. Bill, after over 30 years with CUIAB, will be retiring soon, and next week is his last week at work. So we just want to thank Bill for his many years of service.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate that.
I'd like to join, have all of us join in thanking him, because he's done a great job.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, for the record, would you show in the minutes all board members thanking Bill for his service? Anything else? Then we'll move on to our next report by our CIO, Jeff Willoughby.
Members of the board. A very brief update on our modernization project. Next week, we'll be receiving back our vendor input from our request for information that we posted out online. That should give us a much better idea of the overall vendor capabilities and high-level costs that we can anticipate for that project coming to fruition. We'll score those responses and continue to move through the Department of Technology's project approval lifecycle. And we will also be wrapping up another initiative this month, sort of a behind-the-scenes thing that's been going on nights and weekends. Obsolete network equipment has been getting replaced throughout the state. So our network team has been doing really good work in not allowing this work to impinge on any daytime activities. They're doing all of this kind of off hours. I want to thank them for that, and that'll be done by the 30th of this month.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions or comments? Michael?
First of all, thank you for accomplishing that without the disruption, and I have been involved with it and know that there has been no disruption. I was looking over the notes of the minutes, and I believe that Vice Chair Reeves asked about the audit report and the agency response. If there's going to be summaries provided, and if we would have a chance to weigh in on that before the final part of it. Do you remember that question, I believe?
I will definitely work to get that.
Okay, when is it, the final audit and the report?
So the final,
I'm not sure if I'm referring to, it's the audit report and the agency response. Is that a term?
so we have an opportunity to respond to their findings, and we're in that period now.
Is it too late, or do we still have time to
No,
respond?
we still have time to respond.
Okay. That, yeah, I thought that was a good question, and I thought it might be good to take
So Jeff, when will you get that out to board members, the summary?
I can work with the executive director and yourself to make sure that it gets out in the appropriate manner
Well, so is it the 19th of September the response is due?
next week. Yeah,
So,
Get the
so we'll
summary
get it out.
the summary to you very quickly.
Later this afternoon. We'll just
Okay, all right, board members, so you'll get your summary later this afternoon, and we'll go out to board members. And if you have individual questions or comments, then you can work directly with Jeff, but we can't work with each other because we won't have a board meeting. All right, good question. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we move on to our report from Rob Silva, our Chief Officer of Administrative Services. Now, Rob, you've got your report as item 9, and then you're handling the budget item 10. Are those separate, or will you incorporate?
Chair Block, I only have the budget to report on. I don't have a separate administrative update, so the budget will
Okay,
be
so
the
we're
only
moving
report.
now to item 10, which is an action item. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and open this up on the screen. I do believe the slides are in your folder as well. So I'm going to take some time to go over our budget authority and branch allocations for state fiscal year 2019-2020. Prior to the October 2018 revise, our base budget for state fiscal year 2019-20 was projected to be roughly $79.9 million, and that's for all salaries, associated benefits, and operating expenses and equipment. The October 2018 revise projected unemployment insurance workload figures of 420 for state fiscal year 2018-19 and 200,200 UI cases for 19-20. This reduction of 2,220 UI cases for state fiscal year 19-20 resulted in a total position reduction of 22 PY. That position reduction is a shared position reduction between CUIAB and the Employment Development Department. However, because we do the majority of the work associated with unemployment appeals, roughly 76% of that work, we suffered the lion's share of that reduction, equaling 16.9 positions. This deletion of 14 permanent positions and 2.9 temporary help positions as we enter 2019-20 resulted in an authority decrease of $1.6 million in salaries and $1.1 million in benefits, for a total decrease that you see on the screen of $2.7 million for 19-20. The next line shows the decrease in funding due to the sunset of our 2-year tax program budget change proposal. Over the last 2 fiscal years, the tax BCP provided us with an additional 12.5 positions. However, 5.4 of those positions were temporarily given to us for that 2-year period. So the 5.4 positions drop off as we enter 19-20, and that results in an authority decrease of $430,000 in salaries, $301,000 in benefits, and $100,000 in OE&E operating expenses. So the total decrease there is $831,000.
PYs was that again for that?
It was a total of 12.5 positions, 5.4 of which were temporary for that 2-year period.
Sorry, how many? 5?
5.4.
I was thinking that's on top of the 6.9, 16.9 positions that we lost,
That is correct. It's in addition to.
in addition to.
Ralph?
So the only other question I have about the projecting the tax caseload in the future is I guess no one's discussed, or I don't know if we have an ability to figure out whether the AB5 is going to affect either the number of tax cases or their complexity in the future. So I just thought I'd put that out as a point. Because if it turns out that it affects the complexity of the cases, that might affect this number.
The last line here is general salary increases for SEIU represented employees, as well as managerial employees exempt from bargaining that supervise SEIU employees. They received a 3.5% general salary increase as of July 1st. The official request for this augmentation has yet to go to Department of Finance. It'll go this month. But we estimate our authority increase to be $877,000 for that. Bringing our estimated 1920 authority to $77.2 million.
If I could just pick up on what Ralph said, the question about what will AB5, if signed, what impact will that have on our tax cases or cases in general? That's part of the problem, I guess, with our budgeting. It's not our problem, it's just inherent in the system. We'll see next year what kind of impact it has, but it probably won't be budgeted until the following year. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to take effect in January, then we'll be able to hopefully have enough data by March or April as we enter the May revise to plan for next fiscal year.
There might be something to inform the May revise.
Thank you, Rob.
There's a
Michael,
question about that last point. So there was negotiations, I believe, with Case. Is that the SEIU settlement you're referring to?
Oh, no, that's SEIU is not the case union.
Okay.
It's the staff union.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that a recent agreement, or is this something that happened a while back? Or?
Yeah, it happened. They came to agreement a few weeks ago. I know that Case has reached a tentative agreement. I was reading it in the SAC-B. I put this slide together before that happened, I believe,
Okay.
on Thursday or Friday of last week. So to address that, I do believe they have a one-year tentative agreement for a 2.75% general salary increase as backdated to July 1st. So we should receive an additional augmentation to cover that in our budget.
So this is not, the
that-
Case agreement was not reflected in this?
That is correct.
And what do you think, and so you're just going to send out a revision for that?
I can send out a revision. It will be, yes, I can absolutely update you on that.
And call
I mean,
it
we'll
the
just,
September revise or something like that.
I mean, we'll receive the authority to pay for the general salary increases, so the resulting reserve would essentially be the same.
Okay.
But both numbers, both the authority and allocations would change.
Okay, thank you.
Upwards.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
And Rob, for GSIs, we're basically just a pass-through, right? The money comes to us and goes to the employee. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
yes. Okay, on the next slide, this is a breakout of our budget resources. As I think we all know, almost 90% of our budget is from federal funding to administer the unemployment insurance appeals cases. About 8.5% of our budget comes from state funding to administer disability insurance cases and paid family leave, as well as the disability portion of our employer tax hearings. About 1.5% comes from the state's general fund for the personal income tax portion of our tax hearings. And we also receive, as you can see, a very small amount of funding from Department of Child Support Services to hear cases on the unemployment insurance and disability insurance child support intercept program, as well as funding to hear non-industrial disability insurance cases. In this slide, illustrated a few large ticket expenditures and savings for state fiscal year 2019-20. The first line, we've built into the budget about $1.5 million in salaries for positions that would be above and beyond any filled positions as of July 2019. Included in the slide item are 19 new position requests. Currently, there are 2 active recruitments, for hire in CUIAB, an office technician in the San Diego Office of Appeals, and an information technology specialist in the IT branch. We will recruit for the other positions as they become a necessity. That time of year when we're working with EDD's program estimates group to put together workload projections for the October revise and the official appeals workload that will eventually be part of the governor's Jan 10 budget is what will drive our decision-making process on additional staff hires to CUIAB because we want to ensure that staffing and workload continue to work lockstep with each other. The next line is budgeting for the appeals modernization project we've been discussing at a few prior board meetings. We've earmarked $1.5 million for that. While all of the cost associated with this effort will fall within operating expenses, it's really too early in the process to determine where they'll fall. There will probably be a combination of consultants from California Department of Technology, private vendor, equipment purchases, travel costs. But we have earmarked the funding here under professional services contracts, and then we'll disperse the funding to the appropriate expense codes as procurement continues for this project over the course of the fiscal year. The next line item request is for some facility upgrades downstairs in our Sacramento Office of Appeals. We intend to overhaul the modular furniture in the support staff area and replace all of the carpet in the hearing rooms and adjacent hallways. We've been performing piecemeal repairs to the modular since the late 1990s. The whole suite is, let's just say it's sorely due for an upgrade. The carpet in particular was installed in 2006, but it is the path of travel for the public, so it's quite worn, and we want to upgrade that as well. And the last line on this slide is an adjustment we make each year to the personnel budget. Generally, we budget each employee pursuant to their time base, but we inevitably, end up over budgeting because people take leaves of absences for several reasons. And so to sort of adjust that, what we do is we know that when we have to backfill positions, there's typically a 3-month delay built in. So we take last year's attrition rate and understand that there is this delay, and we project that we'll save about $353,000 in salaries because of that delay in backfilling positions. So we're just trying to right-size the personnel side of the budget to balance out the fact that we're over budgeting for people that may be taking a leave of absence during the course of the fiscal year. The next 3 slides focus on operating expenses and equipment. This particular slide, each February, each cost center within CUIAB submits call letter requests for certain OE&E categories. And this slide shows the differences between the proposed allocations for 1920 and what were the allocations for 1819 for these categories. The first 4 lines on this document are for equipment and software purchases. As you can see, collectively, there's a significant decrease for these categories in 1920. And the reason for the majority of that decrease is recently completed a refresh of outdated PCs that has been reported to the board. We've also modernized all of our telephone systems department-wide, and so we're finding ourselves currently not in a place to need to this fiscal year purchase a tremendous amount of those equipment items. The only line item on the document with a significant increase in allocation is right about in the middle of the page, professional services contracts at about a 75% increase between the 2 fiscal years. And that increase is being driven by the appeals modernization project I mentioned earlier, with $1.5 million earmarked for that. As in the previous 2.5 fiscal years, we intend to continue to focus on staff training in 2019-20. We're budgeting a 21% increase over last fiscal year's allocation. This is training including general employee training and development for both field and appellate staff, the leadership for government managers through Sac State that Chief Gonzalez mentioned during last board meeting, as well as the continuation of the Six Sigma Lean training for both the introductory white belt and yellow belt training for staff. So overall on this page, you can see the 29% increase in these call letter categories over last fiscal year. The next slide has ongoing costs that really make up the majority of the OE&E budget. As you can see at the bottom of the page, the cumulative decrease in these ongoing costs of 1% essentially equates to business as usual. But I do want to specifically speak about 4 line items on this page. There are 4 operational expenditure categories: office supplies, travel, postage, and interpreter services that, as you can imagine, ebb and flow with our workload. Last year, we saw expenditures in these categories drop significantly in concert with our unemployment insurance workload. So although we are proposing allocation decreases of 21%, 24%, 13%, and 14% respectively for these categories in 1920, collectively, these allocations equate to 27% more than what we actually ended up spending in the year 2018-19. So although they're lower from last year's initial allocations, they're still higher than the actual expenditures. So if we do have an uptick in workload during the course of 1920, these proposed allocations should be enough to satisfy the corresponding need for the categories. Speaking specifically about travel, in the document, the $428,000 allocation is actually 40% above last year's actual true expenditures. So that should not only cover hearing-related travel, again, with an uptick in workload, but also non-hearing related travel needs for both the appeals modernization project and the Six Sigma Lean training that we're planning for the year.
Bob, can I?
Sure.
There's one thing that increased, and that's other services.
Other?
Can you give me an example of what would fall into that?
Sure. Other services include, well, there's some oddball things, confidential destruction. We have trucks come to our sites to do confidential destruction of our files. We also have storage at the State Record Center. Some of our offices don't have on-site storage to store 3 years' worth of closed files, so there's an ongoing payment with State Record Center. There are also witness fees and mileage reimbursement for witnesses for our hearings. What really drove the increase is there's a self-insurance assessment for the costs of the administration of workers' compensation and health and safety labor standards enforcement programs. What that means is Workers' Comp Appeals Board charges us Uninsured Employers Benefits Trust Fund, Occupational Safety and Health Fund, Labor Enforcement and Compliance Fund. It's something they put into place for self-insured employers about 2 fiscal years ago, and they've raised their rates, so that's what's accounting for most of the increase there. You're welcome.
I've got a question on this slide too.
Sure.
Under computer output microfilm,
Yes.
is that an obsolete category at this point?
It has, you remember last year's presentation. I think I might remove it for next year. I thought, we haven't used it for a couple of years, so maybe I'll just remove it altogether. Good catch.
Chairman Blanc,
Yes.
I had a question too. after
Member
you're
Eng, go
finished.
ahead.
Well, thank you for the report. I did have a question on the travel and auto expense. I was a little confused. The percentage change was 24% in reduction, but you said something went up?
Yeah, the reduction between the 2 fiscal years, I'll go back to the slide.
Okay.
Under travel, I'm sorry, I went back, pardon me.
You're on the right slide.
I
Yeah.
was. So there's a 24% decrease from what was last fiscal year's initial allocation of $564,000, okay? But the new allocation is actually 40% more than we ended up spending last fiscal year. Last fiscal year was a very low unemployment insurance workload year. So we only ended up spending, in travel last year, roughly $300,000.
Oh, I see. So this doesn't have the actual spend.
No, this is a comparison of the initial allocations
allocation.
of both
Okay, I
fiscal
see.
years.
All right. So you're anticipating spending less or more?
We're anticipating spending more in travel.
Okay, because of, you anticipate because the load was lower last year as opposed to
Yes.
this year,
Correct.
moving forward, so you actually expect more.
In all candor, I can't see unemployment insurance workload getting any lower. It just continues to decrease over the last half a decade. And last year being, I think, the lowest output point in several years, and I just expect the economy to go head another direction. So I want to make sure that we have enough dollars in the travel budget so that ALJs can continue to conduct hearings.
Yeah, I must say that on the organizations I've sat on the travel and travel expenses are the items that continue to always rise regardless. So if you can actually find a sweet point where travel goes down because the caseload goes down, that's actually a good thing. As opposed to regardless of any data.
Yeah, our travel pretty consistently since the 2013 really does ebb and flow with our workload. We don't have a lot of travel expense outside hearing travel costs.
And that's mainly related to the cases where the witnesses travel, et cetera, or is it
Right.
mainly witness travel?
No, just, it's our specific travel to hearing outstations that are associated with a headquarter office. If there are witness fees or mileage reimbursement, they're captured under a different
Could I
expense
ask what
code.
that, just for.
Please.
Could I ask what the reimbursement rate is for
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I'd be
okay, well,
happy to
you
get
can
that
it to
for
me
you.
in the meantime.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. This is the overall difference between this fiscal year and last with regard to OE&E allocation. So the total increase here of almost $680,000 is about 4% over our allocation from last fiscal year. Moving on to some personnel. Last fiscal year, the board approved a budget of 402.4 positions and $36.8 million in salaries. For 2019-20, our proposal for permanent positions is 24 less than last year, and for temporary help positions, 3.3 less than last year.
And Rob, is that decrease through attrition?
The decrease is, well, as we enter the fiscal year, we have 22.3 less positions to work with. That was both the tax BCP and the UI decrease I spoke of earlier. And there's also, so there's a 5 position discrepancy between the 27.3 you see here and the 22.3 that we're receiving as a decrease. And two of you may remember last fiscal year, we actually over budgeted our personnel by 5 positions. It was as much as we could possibly cut at the time, and we were going to utilize operating expenses to cover those. So we've right-sized our request this year, so that accounts for the other 5 positions we're reducing here. None of these reductions, by the way, are coming through a reduction in force. These are already existing vacancies through attrition. The long way to answer your question. So, yeah. The vacant positions have already been given up.
Thank you, Rob. Dan?
So I understand they're vacant positions, but how many of those positions, for instance, are ALJ positions that we're not going to fill as a result of this decrease? Like Bill Purcell retires, are we going to replace?
Absolutely, yeah. This does not impact our ability to backfill behind ALJs or non-ALJs who leave.
Well, doesn't it? If you're decreasing your overall number of PYs and
Yeah, but
you're counting on attrition to that objective?
yeah, we're already budgeting, in an earlier slide, we have $1.5 million we've added to this fiscal year's allocation, representing about 19 new positions. And we can hire those 19 new positions and suffer through this vacancy reduction. So above and beyond those 19 positions, when people leave, we can backfill. So this does not impact it. We're budgeting for 19 new positions and continuous backfills when backfills are needed. I mean, as you can imagine, there are situations in which someone could separate where a backfill would not necessarily be needed.
Let me just add, I've been through a few of these presentations now, but if this is your first presentation, if anything is confusing or needs further explanation, Rob's happy to sit down with individual board members and go through in much more detail. So don't hesitate to set up.
Yeah, please, anytime. I was mentioning the temp help reduction. The temporary help includes both overtime and lump sum expenditures, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. But we've also earmarked funding in our temp help bank for the equivalent of 4.5 retired annuitant ALJs and 2.2 retired annuitant support staff in 1920. We utilize these retired annuitants to cover when employees are out due to illness or annual leave, as well as to stay on top of workload. If there is a substantial recruitment delay when needing to backfill a position, we also can rely on these retired annuitants to fill that void. Again, as you can see, we're requesting an overall decrease from last fiscal year's allocation of 27.3 positions, which is $1.7 million less in salaries. Our overtime allocation, it's based on the actual expenditure from state fiscal year 2018-19, which was roughly $40,000. We really underutilized overtime last year, but we've also augmented what was last year's actuals with $10,000 because we assume we may need some overtime for the rollout of the appeals modernization project as that moves forward. And also in temp help is our lump sum allocation. Last year we spent $412,000 in lump sum payouts for separating employees. For state fiscal year 1920, we're proposing to carry over that expenditure level and augment it by roughly $200,000. The reason for that is there are some employees with significant leave balances that have expressed an interest to me in retiring this fiscal year. Because of the strides we've made that some board members are aware of over the last 4 or 5 years in reducing excess leave balance. We've actually reduced excess leave by 85% in the last 4 years. With that effort, if the employees I'm referring to do retire this coming fiscal year, in all likelihood, we may be able to cover or absorb their lump sum within a $400,000 allocation. But I just wanted to err on the side of caution and earmark funding here for that, and we did overspend our allocation, our lump sum allocation last fiscal year. So here is the proposal summary for 2019-20. As you can see in the left column, we're projecting to spend our personnel budget slightly under, ever so slightly under our authority, with a balance of $41,000. However, because we're projecting to have a surplus in operating expenses of about $700,000, our fiscal reserve is at almost $750,000. Last year's was $680,000 for reference. At the bottom of the slide, there is a percentage breakdown of both positions and dollars. And for both categories, the percentages are consistent with last fiscal year. And this slide, it's just a simple breakdown of where the operating expense and personnel dollars are separated by branch. With this breakout, appellate operations is roughly 8.8% of the total. Administrative services, 6.6%. Information technology, 11.2%. Executive staff, 5.2%. And field operations, 71.2%. This percentage breakdown has been fairly consistent over the last 3 fiscal years. However, for 2019-20, IT's portion of the budget has increased by 2%, which again is attributable to the $1.5 million that's earmarked for the appeals modernization project. Questions about that?
Okay, any questions for Rob?
Then I will say thank you.
Rob, thank you. Very, very clear, thorough presentation. And board members, like I said, there are issues, I mean, questions have been raised that are very reasonable questions, but I'm sure have very reasonable answers. And rather than taking time now in the board meeting, feel free one-on-one to go speak with Rob. Okay, that is the last item. Oh, it's an action item. We have to take a vote. Do we adopt this budget? Is there a motion to approve the 2019-2020 fiscal year budget?
So moved.
Moved by member Eng, seconded by member Lightstone. We'll do a roll call vote on this. Vice Chair Reeves? Member Lightstone? Member Eng?
Aye.
Member Allen?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Please show that passing and the budget being adopted unanimously. And with that, then, I think we've concluded all of our open session business. Anything else for open session? Seeing nothing, we do have closed session business today, so we will recess into closed session. Okay, we are moving back into open session. We've completed our closed session agenda. There have been no votes to report out. So at this point, we will adjourn open session. We're adjourned.